Good evening and welcome. My name is Matt Davis, and I'm the Director of Life and Justice Ministries for the Diocese of Camden. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our panel discussion, The Catholic Voter, Civility, and Forming Our Consciences. In this panel, we will highlight two important and timely initiatives of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Civilize It and Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. I want to give a special thanks to St. Maximilian Kolbe Parish in Marmora, New Jersey, for co-sponsoring this event with my office. With today's panel, we combine two interconnected initiatives from the U.S. bishops. With Civilize It, the bishops ask us to reflect on being civil and staying unified as Catholics, even with our different understandings and disagreements, as we talk about issues that have become increasingly contentious, like voting, politics, and the upcoming presidential election. Civilize It does not talk about how to vote, but rather how to treat others with whom we may talk about politics and voting. This fits in nicely with Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, our second initiative to look at this evening. The U.S. bishops put out Faithful Citizenship before every presidential election to help the faithful prayerfully consider how to form our consciences to vote. To help us go deeper into both of these initiatives, I'm honored to welcome and introduce our panelists. Jill Rauh is the Director of Education and Outreach, the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. It is her office in the USCCB that brings us both Civilize It and Faithful Citizenship. So it's an honor to have her here with us. Thanks for being here and welcome, Jill. Andrew Musgrave serves as the Director of Catholic Social Action Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. Civilize It started in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, so it's a pleasure as well to have Andrew with us. Welcome, Andrew. Claudia Trani-Melgar is the Director of Communications and works in Hispanic ministry for St. Clare of Assisi Parish in Swedesboro, New Jersey. Claudia is originally from Bolivia, but she's been in Jersey long enough for us to officially call her a Jersey girl. Great to see you and welcome, Claudia. Father Pete Joyce has been a priest in the Diocese of Camden for 29 years. Currently, he is the pastor of St. Maximilian Kolbe Parish in Marmora, New Jersey, the co-sponsoring parish of this panel. Welcome and thanks for being with us, Father Pete. Before I get into the questions, I want to review the format for tonight's panel, which will have three sections. During the first section, I will ask questions on both Civilize It and Faithful Citizenship to give us a broad sense of what these initiatives are about. In part two, I will ask a few questions that were submitted to me in advance from people across the Diocese of Camden. During part three, I will take questions from our live audience. For those in our live audience, to submit a question, please find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It should be right next to the raise hands button. So if you click on the Q&A button, then you can write your question in the box that pops up and submits it. We will do our best to take as many of these questions as we can at the end. Again, for our live audience to submit a question, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to submit your question now or anytime during our panel discussion. Mindful that the first presidential debate is tonight at 9 p.m., we're going to try to be over well before that to give you plenty of time to take a break, hopefully with some new ideas and thoughts from our panel before you watch the debate. Before we get into our questions, though, I want to ask Father Pete to share a prayer to help center our conversation for this evening. Father Pete, you probably need to take yourself off mute. And please, Father Pete, can you lead us in prayer?
And I ask us to be mindful that the best prayer is the prayer that moves into action. And what we're going to pray tonight is the Civilized Pledge. It's a commitment that the dignity we seek to know in each and one another would be represented in the dialogue we have this evening, and hopefully as we move forward in this election year that, again, we may in some way be enriched by this commitment to search out the dignity of all peoples. With that background, we pray together, and I offer this prayer for us. I pledge to recognize the human dignity of those with whom I disagree. I pledge to treat others with respect and to rise above attacks when directed at me. I pledge to root my political viewpoints in the gospel, to seek a well-formed conscience which involves prayer, conversation, study, and listening. I will stand up for my convictions and speak out when I witness language that disparages others' dignity, while also listening and seeking to understand others' experiences. And I pledge to seek to encounter others with a tone and posture which affirms that I honor the dignity of others and invites others to do the same. I will presume others' best intentions, and I will listen to their stories with empathy, and I will strive to understand before seeking to be understood. And I make all this pledge through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father Pete. So Civilize It is an initiative that originated in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. It calls for us to have civil and respectful dialogue over matters like politics and voting. Andrew, coming from the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, can you tell us more about Civilize It and why it should be an initiative we all take part in?
Sure. Thanks, Matt, and thanks for inviting me to be here. It's an honor to be able to be a part of this great discussion, this great webinar with so many great people. In the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, like I imagine virtually every other diocese around the country, when it comes to an election season, those who are in the kind of offices like we are, social action, we do our best to get the word out to Catholics about faithful citizenship and about the importance of voting, the importance of forming your conscience to be able to vote faithful to our church, and for the importance of engaging in the political process. What we've seen for a number of election cycles and saw in a significant way coming into the 2016 election cycle was that we were becoming more and more divided, more and more polarized, and that polarization and division was leading us to harsher, more vitriolic language, more personal attacks, a lot less civility and a lot less compassion in what we were doing. And so what we thought was good to build on our formational resources for faithful citizenship was to establish a program where people could come together and learn together across the aisle with folks who feel differently, who believe differently than them, can come together and learn the skills about how to, in a very compassionate and confident and civil way, talk to each other. And maybe more importantly, how to listen to each other. And so we came up with the program Civilize It, and we did this in partnership with our evangelization office, our communication office, and several others who work in the pastoral center, and came up with the pledge that you heard Father Pete share, and some other tools, and some different, again, resources so that people could say, you know, I feel differently than my neighbor, I feel differently than my spouse, I feel differently than my parents, but I want to be able to talk with them and rise above this vitriol. And I want to be different. I want to be an example of light and an example of something different in this world where there is so much messiness and so much anger swirling around us. That idea of being in the world but not being of the world was really present. So we came up with this idea of Civilize It. And the idea was, you're going to be talking to people, you're going to have different positions, you're going to feel passionately, and it's important to talk about this. Our faith calls us to be involved and to be engaged, but if you're going to do it, you should do it in a Christ-like way. You should do it in a way that shows that you are passionate, but also that you value the other person, that you see the dignity in the other person, the value in the other person, and that you want to learn from them and hopefully have a fruitful and peaceful discussion so that you can both grow in your understanding but still be faithful to your faith and be peaceful.
Well said. Thank you, Andrew. Jill, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has taken Civilize It and made an initiative for the entire country. Is there anything else you can add about it?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for asking that. Well, so first of all, a thank you to the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, because Andrew and Archbishop Schnurr were so generous to allow USCCB to post and add to their materials and put them up at civilizeit.org, which is the website where folks can learn more. But I think the thing that I really want to emphasize about Civilize It is that, recognizing the reality that we are in a church right now that is very divided, that is very broken in a lot of ways. And we experience that in our relationships as we have family members or friends who we may not agree with on things, and we may get into a very confrontational, angry conversation sometimes. And that happens both in our individual relationships and in the more public, sphere online. If we want there to be civility and love in the model of Jesus, we have to be the example that we want to see, right? And so when our committee chairmen were thinking about how do we confront this division that we're really seeing in the church, Civilize It really seemed like a great tool to address that, because it's not only about challenging other people to be civil, it's about looking at my own heart to examine. There's an examination of conscience on the website, for example, that I have used myself and returned to throughout, election season as well, where, asking ourselves, what assumptions am I making about those who don't share the same positions that we have as Catholics? Where am I assigning motives to people instead of hearing their experiences and their stories and looking for ways where we can find unity and have conversations? There's the interpersonal aspect in one-to-one conversations, and then there's also like the online aspect too. Think about your social media pages and how often do you maybe make a quick comment or a like and you don't think about the person who's on the other end of that. So I think that Civilize It is a challenge for us to take to prayer and to take to reflection, to think, where is my own heart at? And am I modeling the imitation of Christ? Am I imitating Christ in my actions and my thoughts and my attitudes as well? So yeah, visit civilizeit.org, and there's a lot there. You can sign the pledge. It's very rich, and I pray that it will be helpful for you as it has been for me.
Great job. I want to affirm I'm using the pledge right now, and it's helping me call to myself to greater reflection about how I treat people, and rising above others if they're maybe not as nice with you. So I really appreciate the initiative. When I first read about Civilize It, I thought about one of my favorite themes of Pope Francis, a culture of encounter, and how through dialogue we can build bridges with each other across differences through this culture of encounter. Claudia, some of the political and social issues that the church promotes, like care for the unborn and welcome and care for the immigrants, can sometimes be controversial in society and in the church. How can that culture of encounter help us to witness to our faith to those who may disagree with the church on these important matters?
Thank you, Matt, for that question. And I wanted to say that it's really a big honor for me to be sharing this panel with all of you guys. Thank you for the invitation. And I think the first key to understand the culture of encounter is pretty much understanding what people is about. What I'm saying is the power of listening and to get to know the other person. But when we say to listen, sometimes we're just listening with our ears. And when we talk about culture of encounter, we have to go farther than that. We have to start listening with our hearts. We have to start understanding the other person and where are they coming from. And this happens especially if we are an open-minded person in the way that A cultural encounter is not only to talk to the people they agree with you, or people to convince them to believe what you believe. And if they are not in the same boat that you are, it's difficult to have that conversation. But the minute that you go out of your comfort zone, and remember, encounter comes from the word also encuentro. What it doesn't mean to stay in your area and just wait for everybody to come to you. Encounter is actually to go and meet the person where they are. And I love that this word was used especially for the Quinto Encuentro, when we have that experience to open our heart to others, because it had given me many opportunities to practice this every day in my parish, in my life, with other immigrants, with other people that I get to know. And there's a lot of people that doesn't recognize the differences in culture, tradition, language. And we often want people to think just like us. And even in my personal life, I had experienced how this changed for me, that experience to go and find the other where they are and putting my heart before my ears. It had definitely given more fruits and more things to think about all the time. So when we are, especially in difficult times like we are right now, we want to make sure that we know the other person. You cannot love sometimes if you don't know what you are looking for. You know, it's just like our faith. In order to grow our spiritual life, we have to learn to know Jesus and God and the teachings, what our church, what our faith is telling us about. So we look for this in everybody. Every human being is valuable. Every person in the world is alive, and it's a person that we wanted to make sure that it follows our values and traditions. And this sometimes is very difficult when we are looking for justice and peace, even in our own neighborhoods, in our family members, or in our parish, in our communities, to be that bridge that unite people in the love of God. It has to kind, like everybody's saying, rise above everything that we wanted to think about only ourselves. So Pope Francis have been bringing this message everywhere in all the, the speech that he has given. Even on the 25th, he was mentioning during the UN the speech that he recorded, what is the importance of our leaders to go out and to work for the people that is, in need, the poor, the hungry, the ones that are in need of our assistance. So it is important for us that we think and we understand in the way that we are going to do as a faithful people, not just as a person that believes in something in a political situation or in our daily lives, but we believe with our hearts that we need to go and look for the other person when they are, with empathy and with love. And with love for God, love our neighbor. That's our main thing all the time. It doesn't matter who they are and how do they think. We have to be, and instead of being open-minded, I will say we have to be open-heart and also show ourselves, not just show our mask or a facade of who we are, but we truly, truly wanted to find this experience of encounter. We have to get out of our comfort zone and go and show everybody that we are open-hearted for all the kinds of situations that we wanted to deal with.
Great, thank you. Father Pete, what's a pastor perspective on how our views on politics can be divisive, sometimes seep into our churches, and how can Civilize It and the culture of encounter benefit our churches?
Claudia and Andrew and Jill all referenced a common theme in their initial remarks. It's Christ at the center. And it was wonderful to hear that. I find in the parish, when it's no longer his teaching or his gospel, which is the good news, and he's not at the center, that's when people lose that central focus as well. And what I kind of appreciated the commentary that I just heard was, In the parish, yes, no doubt about it. This time has caused stress in communities, because what I find among my people, though, wonderfully, is a desire to not be adversarial, and yet the passion of the discussion, I find, is one that causes people to be cautious. It causes people to maybe to not speak their truth as clearly or plainly. And what I find is it leaves a discussion flat. It leaves discussion that's not fulfilling, and it's not what we've been talking about, a dialogue anymore. What it is people sort of pull back and throw into their camps, and that's where we're kind of left. And that's why I wanted to say I appreciate what Claudia and Andrew and Jill were saying was, you know, when we talk about this civil discourse, I was smiling, thinking to myself, it's not an option for a Christian. This is the mandate from the Lord. Andrew said, you know, we are of the world, but not in the, we're in the world, but not of the world. And I was thinking, but we are, because we recognize it. We're called to be light of the world, the salt of the earth. And so it's being able to put Christ, his message, and ourselves together that I think is going to be the source where the dialogue can begin, because when we find ourselves committed to that message and that gospel, we can always find the common themes and threads which could be the underpinnings for a fruitful dialogue. So I think that's my experience as a pastor right now is, how do I invite people to always put that gospel message and our mandate to be witness that gospel forward.
Thank you, Father Pete. I'm going to change it up now so we can get into the second initiative. So Jill, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship is an initiative that comes out of your office in the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops every 4 years before a presidential election. Faithful Citizenship is a 53-page document, which I recommend to read in its entirety. For our audience, can you give them a taste of what Faithful Citizenship is about? And what are some of the important themes we should consider as we read and reflect on faithful citizenship?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So first of all, I just want to note that the Faithful Citizenship Statement comes out of the entire body of bishops. It is voted on and approved in the General Assembly. And this past November, the bishops voted to reissue the statement that they had written 4 years before, because they felt that it was still really, really relevant. They added a new introductory note to it and made some videos, but they basically reaffirmed that the statement that which they had nearly unanimously passed 4 years before, it was still very relevant. So one of the things that my office does, though, is we do have the responsibility for doing education around faithful citizenship around the country every election season. And we often do that in like a 45-minute presentation. I'm not going to give that to you now. What I am going to do is maybe identify just 4 main themes that are maybe relevant to this conversation today. So the first one is the call to participate. Even though it's something that can be uncomfortable to participate in political life, it's something we can't shy away from, because it is part of our baptismal call. We are called to work to transform the world where all of God's children whom he loves live. It's something that we can't not do as people of faith. And that participation is year-round. It includes voting, but it's about way more than voting. It's about being involved as active community members. It's about advocating with elected officials year-round, serving. Even those, the bishops say in the statement, even those who don't have the ability to vote can still participate in many other ways and have the right to have their voices heard. So that call to participate, number 1. Number 2, faithful citizenship is about a call to form our consciences. What is conscience? Well, conscience, defined by the Second Vatican Council, is that secret core and sanctuary where the voice of God echoes in our hearts, summoning us to love good and avoid evil. And we have to, however, form our consciences. We don't just, we aren't just born one day and suddenly we have this well-developed conscience. It doesn't work like that. We form our consciences throughout our lives, through prayer, through openness to seek the truth, studying scripture and the teachings of the church, examining facts and background information about issues. And so we have to go through a process of seriously doing that. And it's also not something we can do the night before the election when we're trying to decide who to vote for. It's a process that we have to be engaging on an ongoing basis. And then another piece is third, I want to lift up the theme that in Faithful Citizenship, the bishops talk about how, as Catholics, as we think about our political participation, we have two duties that are essential obligations. So number one, we have a duty to reject evil, such as the taking of innocent human life or racism, as two examples that they give of evils that we should reject. And then we also have a positive duty to work for the common good so that everyone has access to food and shelter and healthcare, education, work, all those things that we need to live and survive. And so we must ask ourselves, how in my political participation can I both reject evil and promote good? And then fourth, and this is the final point that I'll make before turning it over to my colleagues, is that there are some temptations that we must avoid in political life as well. First, we have to recognize that not every issue has the same moral weight, and we do have to give particular attention to some issues. But at the same time, that doesn't allow us to dismiss other important issues. Another way of thinking about this is that the Catholic perspective is a both and rather than an either or. We advocate for the unborn and work to end racism and to protect the immigrant. We protect families and we safeguard the environment. And we can't say that as Catholics, we are only about one thing or the other. We have to be about all of it. And so we live out this both and approach in our political participation and our ongoing engagement. And so the bishops then talk about a number of issues that we should really be thinking about and taking to heart and reflecting and discerning on as we prepare to cast our vote in the upcoming elections. There's a lot more I could say, but that's probably good there for just a kind of a summary of some of the main points of that statement.
Great, thanks, Jill. Just a reminder to the live audience, if you want to submit a question, go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can submit it there. Andrew, you work for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati with some of your own initiatives around faithful citizenship. Can you highlight for us some of the important ideas you found in faithful citizenship?
Yeah, absolutely. The first two things that I want to say are just to kind of reemphasize two things that Jill said. The first one is when Jill mentioned that call to participate. Pope Benedict, I think it was in Deus Caritas Des, talked about the three kind of main points of what a church is, and they're to preach the word of God, to do the sacraments, and to practice charity and justice. And what I think is really important in that is to remember that in the sacraments we receive grace from God, and we have that special interaction with God and with Jesus, and then when we receive that, we must go out. We must take that out. And so like our baptismal call has a transcendent dimension to what we do, that we must go out and be that light. Father mentioned this, being this light in the world. And so I think that it's one of the critical points is that it isn't an option for us to go to church and receive the sacraments and keep that faith to ourselves, but we really need to go out and participate in the world and be engaged in the world. And that I guess leads me to my second point, which is another thing that I think that is critical in faithful citizenship, is how they talk about applying Catholic social teaching to your formation and to your and to your considerations, your discernment. Catholic social teaching, that robust body of knowledge that's been building for 120 plus years, if we don't count scripture and before that, There's a lot of really great stuff there. There's a lot of great teachings from the bishops, from the popes, from other Catholic theologians and thinkers that really have built up what Catholic social teaching is. And it really gives us great guidance and great tools in how we approach these key ideas in the world, these signs of the times that are in front of us. You asked about some of the things in our Archdiocese. An initiative that we launched this year is a resource website called I Vote Catholic. And what we're doing is during the 7 weeks before the election, so we're in the middle of that now, each of the weeks we've talked about one of the themes of Catholic social teaching in relation to the readings of Scripture and how those readings and how that theme applies to some of the key issues that are swirling around us right now, and how we can evaluate those and discern how we will firm up our position and then decide for whom we'll vote. And so that is a way for us to emphasize the importance of Catholic social teaching as we consider how we're going to vote. The second thing that I want to reemphasize from Jill in that idea of avoiding evil and doing good is if you spend really any amount of time looking at the issues that are so pervasive, the injustices that exist around us, you see very quickly that they're all connected. That the issue of poverty, the issue of abortion, the issue of racism, issues around immigration, the death penalty, they're all woven together. They connect to each other and they influence each other, and we cannot look at one issue in isolation or look at one subset of our population at the disregard of another population. One of the key statements they say is the erosion of the respective life of any individual or group in society necessarily diminishes respect for all life. Right? So if anybody is suffering, we're all suffering. And so we have to see how those injustices are all around us and affecting different people, and interweave over around people, and be really cognizant of that and aware of the injustices that affect all different groups of people. And the last thing that I would mention about the document is near the end of it, it talks about some of the ground rules for civil discourse. And, Civilize it builds on that and has some more robust resources and tools. But it's right there in that document from the bishops, as Jill pointed out, that the whole of the U.S. bishops have approved and put out to the faithful. There's some ground rules and some ideas that really talk to us about our demand to be civil and to be compassionate, when we engage with our brothers and sisters around us, that we have to practice those virtues of charity and justice, that we have to bring the best of ourselves and the best of our faith to those conversations, whether they be in person or they be online, as Jill pointed out. So, there's good focus on focusing on moral principles instead of the polls, or the needs of the weak instead of benefiting the strong, and pursuing the common good. So there's a lot of really good ideals, I think, that are put forth in that document to, again, support us and guide us in how we interact and discuss these political issues and times around us.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm thinking of Pope Francis talks a lot about a throwaway culture. That's what he describes. A throwaway culture throws away vulnerable people, the elderly, the unborn, immigrants, people that are poor, people with disabilities. How do we create a different culture that doesn't throw people away? I think that connects a lot with what you're saying. Jill, a question that came to me multiple times in the last few weeks, and often comes up for Catholics in voting, is abortion. Can you tell us what the U.S. bishops through Faithful Citizenship say about voting and abortion?
Sure, yeah. So to kind of reference what I said a moment ago, it's definitely one of the issues that we give special attention to. And we also can't use our special attention to that to dismiss other issues. For those that might be following along with the statement online, I'm going to just refer specifically to numbers 34 to 37, because that's the section of the statement that really kind of gets into the question that you ask. So what that section says is that Catholics often face difficult choices about how to vote and often don't feel that there are great options that reflect the breadth of Catholic teaching that's before them. Somebody may decide that the issue of abortion is what puts them over the edge to vote for a particular candidate, and that's legitimate when they decide that. In addition, it would be wrong to vote for a candidate who favors a policy promoting abortion or racism or another evil like that if the voter's intent is to support that position. However, someone may at times who rejects their position about one of those evils may decide reasonably that they still want to vote for that candidate for other morally grave reasons, because as I mentioned before, there are a lot of other issues that are really moral obligations for us to look at. Similarly, when we kind of look at different positions and we kind of see that no candidate really reflects our Catholic position, it is possible that somebody might decide to take the extraordinary step of choosing not to vote at all. But that should really only be done after careful deliberation, because we're basically letting other people decide for us if we decide not to vote. And so more likely somebody may decide to vote for a candidate that they don't think is perfect, but who they think will be less likely to advance, flawed positions when it comes to things like abortion or racism or workers' rights or some of the other, evils that were mentioned in the statement. So it's not like a very clear answer. And I realize when I do these presentations, a lot of people are probably looking for you to say, well, this is what the statement says, and this is how you should vote. Well, the fact is, the statement encourages us each to spend some time forming our consciences, doing the steps that I outlined previously, including, our prayer and our openness and our study of church teaching, as well as facts and background information. And then we have to make our own decision in prudential judgment. We're recognizing at the same time that all issues don't carry the same weight, and we're not single issue voters, right? And so there's a lot that goes into that. In addition, another piece, if you kind of continue in that section, we are called to take into account other aspects of a candidate in addition to their positions. The statement talks about the candidate's commitments, their character, their integrity, and their ability to influence a given issue. And the statement notes that in the end, the decision is to be made by each Catholic, guided by their conscience, formed by Catholic moral and social teaching.
Thank you, Jill. In Faithful Citizenship, they talk about a wide variety of social issues and factors to consider when forming our consciences. I'm going to start with Claudia and then go to Father Pete. Besides abortion, which Jill just talked about, what are some other social matters and factors that we should be considering when we form our consciences to vote? Claudia, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, man. So let me start with a quote that Pope Francis uses in 2013 when he was directing his speech to Brazilian leaders. And he said, leadership means making the most just decisions after considering all the options from the standpoint of a personal responsibility and concern for the common good. So here is what Jill and Andrew were saying, like we as Catholic also have that responsibility for the part of the social teachings is care for the refugee, the immigrant, the poor, the other issues of social justice that we show that our faith is telling us to care for the others, not just for a particular community or particular group of people. And this is easy to make a decision when you don't know the other person. And I'm going to take what Father Pete was saying at the beginning. This starts with a dialogue. So you have to have that conversation in the culture of encounter to think about others in a diverse community, including opinions from everybody, and also to consider the different situations that every human person that is surrounding your community, what kind of difficulties they are going through, what kind of abilities they have to provide for their family, why are they fleeing their countries, why are they coming here, why is our moral duty also to support those families and those women and children that are coming from, countries that are war, violence, economic situations, and we have to welcome. We have to welcome our neighbors. That's as part of our social teaching, part of our, love for God, love for the others. So it is definitely a responsibility to consider our communities as a whole diverse group of people with different circumstances around that. So there are different issues, and a lot of people will make their decisions based on their life experiences. I have experienced that when you have not met people from other countries and other realities, you have a very different opinion from the person that have the chance to meet, engage, listen. But like I say in the beginning, with your heart, and to have the chance to dialogue with everybody. So, and we think about a human person as a whole human being. Everybody counts. Everybody is a miracle creation of God, so, and this is important when we are having these conversations, to reflect that, again, we cannot expect everybody to think and to act like us. We have to think about being that bridge of communication among the diverse communities that we have.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks for referring to, I'm always moved by Matthew 25, where he talks about, welcoming the stranger, welcoming the immigrant, people who are poor, stuff like that. It's an important part of our faith. Father Pete, what about you? What are some other factors besides abortion we should be considering when we're forming our consciences to vote?
I was thinking, as Jill was talking about forming our conscience, we recognize that there's so much richness, as Andrew said, to our Catholic Christian tradition. I was thinking, a Holy Father, he wrote in an apostolic exhortation on the call to holiness in the world today. He said that certainly abortion is a preeminent priority for the church today. It's preeminent because of the loss of life, the scandal, and what Andrew said, how it touches so many other aspects of a person's life. But then he used this expression I thought was powerful, and I think what we're all addressing is a similar point, was he said, but equally sacred. And then he went on to speak about some of the issues that we've all been addressing here today. And it is care for the poor, the migrant, the immigrant. We were talking about healthcare, care for creation. It hasn't come up yet, but clearly the Holy Father has clearly asked the church to recognize the response for the environment today. And then our bishops have been guiding us. Again, Andrew had said, the richness of our church. I always say to Joe, it's hard to form our conscience because, oh my gosh, the richness of our church's tradition. Our bishops have spoken to xenophobia, racism, capital punishment. We talked about the issues that affect the family, marriage, children, trafficking, violence. Now, I could go on that litany. What I'd like to go back to is, rather than overwhelm us with all these issues, it's how do we bring it back to is what we say, is I think what Jill's been saying is, okay, have a formed conscience. And the formed conscience gives us the prudence to be able to discern through all of these myriad issues, because we have been formed and informed by this beautiful, rich Catholic Christian tradition. And I think that's where I would say is, I love the Holy Father's language. It's equally sacred obligation that we have to recognize, as Claudia was saying, the dignity of all life, the dignity of all peoples, and how we recognize that peoples. Maybe the final thing I would say is that among the issues, I think the Holy Father, he wrote in the Joy of the Gospel, sometimes I think when we think of voting, we think of that as a very private and personal act, especially in America. That's something that clearly it's one of our inherent personal private rights. We don't disclose very often who we're voting for, but what the Holy Father said was all our actions have social dimensions and social complications. So even the act of voting has great consequence in the social development. So going back, I'm going to sum it up by saying, therefore, if we recognize the import of our action, we have this incumbent obligation to be formed and well-formed. Informed and well-formed, I think, by Scripture, by the magisterium of the church, and by prayer, as we've heard from the other panelists saying. So I apologize if I spun off a little bit, but I think the issues are myriad, and it's not easily delineated. So that's why I tried to add that. Thanks, Andrew. Or thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Father. Sometimes we get in the mail or email voter guides that say they're Catholic. They often take a more partisan approach in how to vote. Jill, how should we view these guides as they relate to faithful citizenship, which comes from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops?
Sure, yeah. So the bishops do write in the Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship document that they encourage Catholics to use those materials approved by USCCB, the statement itself, and the myriad other resources and materials that are on the faithfulcitizenship.org website. Why do they make that recommendation? Well, we see a lot of guides that come in. We see them partisan on both sides, and we should always be wary when we see any guide that only covers issues that are associated with one party or the other. As we've kind of been saying throughout, we're called to a both and approach. I have a friend who is a priest, and he was telling me a story that this reminds me of, where after celebrating Mass one day, this must have been pre-COVID, because nobody's having these types of interactions in person these days, but somebody came up to him with some materials that they wanted to distribute at the church, and they were supporting a particular candidate, and the person said, Father, you've got to distribute these materials, and this is why this candidate is so great and is the Catholic candidate, the one that all Catholics should vote for. And actually, I don't even know which party the candidate was associated with, but the priest looked at him and he said, "Wow, it sounds to me like your candidate is the way, the truth, and the light." I only know one person who's the way, the truth, and the light, and that's Jesus. And he went on then to have a conversation with this individual about why he did agree with some of the positions of this candidate and that were in the literature, but that there were other things that were missing, and that our Catholic approach needs to bring those things together. And so it was an opportunity for education. But I think rarely do I see a guide that really represents the Catholic position, I think is my point. So use the Faithful Citizenship materials. They're great. There's bulletin inserts, there's reflection guides. I think everything that you need is going to be there, as well as any other materials that your bishop might be approving in your own diocese.
Thank you. I can attest, I've received lots of voter guides. Some of them support one candidate, some support the other. They're out there, but none of them are from the U.S. bishops. I now want to get to some questions submitted to me in advance from people across the diocese. Before I do so, again, a reminder, at the bottom of your screen, hit the Q&A button if you want to submit a question to us now. So a few people wrote me various versions of the same question, which I've combined like this. What is the role of a priest in forming our consciences to think about social matters like abortion, immigration, and the environment, and how we should vote in light of these matters?
Well, Father Pete may have something to say about that, but one thing that I just want to point out is that in the call to form our consciences, the homily is a really good way to do that, because you've got everybody's attention, everybody is there, everyone is hopefully listening. And, I think we need to probably think better as a church about how we do that on a year-round basis, and how we do that from looking at the principles and values that that guide our faith, and speaking from those levels, because in identifying those values, we can kind of come together. It doesn't have to be a divisive sort of, homily that's presented. I'll take this opportunity also to just mention that, in this audience, there may be people who are catechists, children's liturgy teachers, sacramental prep folks. So like it's your role too. I think we put a lot in our priests sometimes, and it's great when we can get out, have homilies that are directly connected with our call to participate. But it's also about you doing that education as the lay leaders, taking up that call, and working with your the parishioners that you have around you, with your families, etc. I'm a children's liturgy leader at my parish, which is just a joy of my life. I love it. I really miss it with COVID. And one of the most powerful things that we did was for one of the Sundays that my parish was taking up the call to care for creation. We did a reading of the story of St. Francis. It was very connected with the gospel reading that day. The kids drew these beautiful pictures about the call to care for creation, and then brought them up in the offertory. And those were actually used with some advocacy that the parish was doing about caring for creation, with a particular, and this is a great like life and justice connection, with a particular connection to how like the embryo in the womb is impacted by when there's environmental contamination and pollutants. So just an example of like, so conscience formation, we can all do it. Great when our priests do it too.
Great. You want to take a stab at this one, Father Pete?
Yeah, and thanks, Jill, because I couldn't agree with you more that the homily is a preeminent opportunity, but it's not the sole opportunity. And what I find also that what I would encourage in answer to that question is, it's this year-round, the document is called Forming Our Conscience. It's not like we arrive at a formed conscience. And so first answer is, I think the priests have to do the work of continuing to be formed and informed. What is the church's teaching? I had a great pastor one time who gave me a great piece of advice one time, and he said, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink, but you can make him thirsty. And I appreciate that, because I think with the purpose of the homily and the purpose of catechesis and the purpose of the opportunities granted us in the privileged encounter that we have with our parishioners, is how do you invite people to say, okay, I know what we're hearing from so many other forms of media. How do we create the opportunity, like we're doing tonight, to say, oh, there are other resources where I can further inform and enrich my understanding of my faith? I believe when the bishops wrote about Faithful, I think some of the things they said is, you have to have a desire to form your conscience. You have to have, and you have to be willing to do the work. And I think sometimes is how can we create opportunities for people to be exposed to the richness again of our rich Catholic tradition, the beautiful teaching tradition of the dignity of life, the sanctity of life, the sacredness of all of creation. How do we as priests create that thirst for people so they're not just satisfied with what they're receiving on social media? So I would add that to the discussion as well.
Great, thank you. Another question I got emailed in advance is, what are some ways the laity can fulfill our civic responsibilities?
I wanted to add a little bit to what Jill and Father were saying, and I'm glad that you asked that question, Matt, because I think it also has to come sometimes as a participation and action, what Jill has been saying at the beginning. As a Catholics, we have been called to action. And if we have a desire and we see something that is not happening in our communities, I think part of our responsibility is also to organize, inform ourselves, pray, discern, but it also create these spaces, not just as part of a mass, of a homily or something, organized by my parish, but also from the bottom up, you know, like parishioners can call to this kind of dialogues, these conversations. I just wanted to share that when we were working with a community of immigrants, non-citizens, you know, they work really hard to get to pass the driver license approval in New Jersey. And this was in, you know, a roots organization that work from the bottom up. They say and introduce to every, you know, parish and say, we need to do this for an immigrant community, and work their way up to make it happen. So there's many places and spaces that we also as citizens or non-citizens can be called to act, and with our social teachings and to care for others. You know, if I have the opportunity to raise my voice for the ones that they can't, it's my obligation to do that too. So my pastor should not be the only one talking about these issues in my parish. As a Catholic, it's my duty to be also raising my voice for everyone that cannot do it for themselves. So I think it's our big responsibility, and there are many options for us to do it. We just have to look for them, and if they are not there, create them. You know, just invite yourself to do or to be the leader, because I'm pretty sure if somebody said to Father Pete, Father, I wanted to create a ministry to start, you know, these activities and forming conscience with a group of leaders in our own parish, I'm pretty sure everybody's going to say, yes, welcome, let's do it together, you know. And I think it's possible. It's just the willingness to do that and to learn and to go for that common good of our communities with the love for God too, you know. So.
Can I add something to that? This isn't the question, but there's a couple of complaints that I hear that kind of connect to both of these questions about the priest role and the laity role that I think are important to address. One of them is, I think Father Pugh can probably testify to this, priests are asked to do so much, and they're asked to do so much all the time with little or no rest. And this isn't to make an excuse, but it is to say they must do things in HR and in finance and in groundskeeping and in liturgical prep. And I mean, it's overwhelming for me to think about all the things that a priest has to do. And so I think to build on what Claudia is saying, we can't expect that our priests are going to be experts in everything, that they're going to be able to do everything. And thankfully there are people like I think those of us gathered here, and hopefully some of you gathered virtually with us, who are passionate about this and who are going to step up, who are going to take on that cross, take up that mantle, and spread this word and talk about this and be formed and learn about Catholic social teaching, learn about these great resources, and then share them with their congregations to support the priest in what they're already doing. And then the second thing is, I hear a lot of people complaining and saying, either my priest is not ever talking about these things, or they say my priest is talking about this and they shouldn't be talking about this because they shouldn't be sticking their nose in politics. So I think we as the laity have responsibilities in both of those. One, if your priest isn't talking about these things, go ask him why. Go talk to him and say, hey, I understand this is part of our call of family, community, and participation to be involved. Can I ask you to talk about this? I'm really yearning for this. I'm thirsty for this. Could you talk about this? Could you help to form us and help to give us some resources or point us in the direction that we can be able to form and grow as individual Catholics and as a community? And if the priest is talking about this stuff, write him a note, give him a phone call and say, thank you for doing this. I guarantee he got a lot of calls saying, get your nose out of politics, don't talk about this stuff. And they need to hear from the people that support them and say, hey, you know what? Thanks for doing that. That was really brave of you and really important that you do that and that you represent well our faith and the importance of being engaged in that. Thanks for doing that. And I think that really will help a lot of priests who maybe feel nervous about it and don't want to upset people to let them know that you appreciate when they do it.
Thanks, Andrew. I saw you smiling, Father Pete. One more question submitted advanced to me. I thought it was an interesting one. It says, please just pick one of these two provided responses to answer this question. If a Roman Catholic was elected president, should they govern, one, as a Catholic following all the teachings of the Catholic Church, or two, as the President of the United States of America representing all of its citizens? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Yes and no. I think that's a false dichotomy. I don't think that's an either or question. I think, I hope any person, regardless of their faith, if they're elected president, will follow a good moral and ethical code. But if a Catholic is elected, whoever it is, and whether it's president or senator or city council person or comptroller, whoever it is, I hope when that person's elected, they bring their values. If it's a Catholic, they bring their Catholic values, their respect for life, their engagement in protecting the family, caring for creation, the rights of workers, caring for the poor and the vulnerable. I hope they bring that forth, and that any legislation that they put forward, any positions they take, are reflective of their faith. And I gotta believe that if it's if they're speaking from their faith, it's for the good of all the people, that they are speaking for taking care of all their constituents, regardless of what their constituency is. So I guess I think that's I don't think that's a fair question to ask, because I hope that a candidate, whether she or he is elected as a Catholic, can do both of those things.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to turn it over now to some questions from our live audience. Mike, our communications guru, is going to share some questions. Mike, you got one for us?
I do. We've received many. Thankfully, throughout the evening, the panel has answered several of them. So I'm going to sort of focus on a few that I don't believe you've touched on particularly thoroughly. One's rather interesting, and I hope I don't get anybody in trouble by asking this question. But the question is, how can I combat in a Christian way the proclamation of some bishops, and I'll extend that to some clergy, that if you vote for a candidate that they name, you are going to hell? Have seen in print several of these comments, and I find many believe it. So if someone comes to you and says, I heard this bishop or this priest say I'm going to go to hell if I vote for this candidate, what would be your recommendation to, how would you counsel this good Catholic who just wants to know how to handle that?
Thanks, Mike. Anyone on the panel want to try that question? Jill?
Sure, yeah, I can take that one. So I can't speak to any particular situations that the person might be referring to, but I think in general, when talking to anyone who adamantly, says, that, you need to, vote this particular way that I have discerned, is the way we should all vote. I think it's good to maybe revisit the statement and to kind of walk through the call that we each have to form our consciences, and to do that through prayer and through study and through learning about the teachings of the church and scripture, and then to make discernment and a prudential judgment about who I am called to vote for. We can't do that and then tell everybody else that that's what they must do as well. It doesn't work that way. That's not really what the teaching is. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that, if you are maybe dealing with parish leadership that you see is maybe making some partisan statements, or just an example of maybe having a voter registration drive, which is a good thing to do, but doing that in a partisan way where they're passing out materials about, one candidate or party because, they're sure that that's how everybody who registers to vote should vote. When the theological, explanation is not, is not, embraced, it's maybe also good to think about the legal implications of that too, because as 501c3s, which all parishes are, that can actually get you in legal trouble when you make statements that are in support of a particular candidate or party. Your 501c3 status can be in jeopardy. And so I'm just kind of pointing out that that's like another kind of way to approach that issue, because it's not appropriate for like parish leadership to be taking partisan positions or giving the appearance of doing that even. So maybe just kind of a good thing to add into the conversation as well.
Thank you, Jill. Mike, you
Yeah,
got another? Father?
And maybe I just had a question. Maybe it's just in light of what Jill and I'm actually going to almost ask a question. Jill is, you know, I think the essence of our church and the essence of our creed is that we are one holy Catholic and apostolic. But the unity of the voice, I have not heard the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops ever come out in a unified voice preaching that message that if you support one another, you will be condemned to hell. I've never heard the Magisterium of the Church Universal making that proclamation either. And I guess my question is, it goes back to this, we have to be faithful to the teaching office of the church. And it sounds like sometimes if one or another chooses to expound a little bit beyond that, is that in harmony with what is the universal teaching of the church or the teaching of our bishops in our country? And I don't know if that's a fair question to Jill or of all of us, but I'm uncomfortable with that message, with people separating themselves from the unity of our Catholic faith and its teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're getting at, Father Pete, is that it's individuals may make an assessment of what who they're going to vote for, and what they discern is sort of the way that they feel called to vote. But that is something that is for that person's individual capacity. The teaching of the church through the Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship statement explicitly says that we don't support any particular candidate or party, that the document is not a voter's guide. It doesn't tell Catholics how to vote. And it's just very direct in saying that. So I think that's maybe what you're getting at, that the teaching of the body as a whole has been that that we cannot and do not tell Catholics who to vote for.
I also want to add that I think you hear this frustration from Catholics that no Catholic embodies the fullness of Catholic teaching, right? No individual person, candidate or otherwise, adheres to everything that the Catholic Church says. And so I think this in the wisdom of the Church and in the Catechism, when it says that our conscience is our highest authority, that if we have this well-formed conscience, if we've gone to Scripture and we've prayed and we've gone to experts, we've listened to what the Church said, and then through that discernment process we've come to a place, we realize that no candidate for any office is Jesus, right? No one is the way and the truth and the light. So they're all going to have faults. They're all going to have areas where they don't line up exactly with Catholic social teaching. And so I guess to support kind of what Father Pete and Jill are saying, it is up to us to do that and to not pawn that off and not to give that decision over to a political party or to anyone else, but it is ours, our right and our responsibility to form our consciences and then discern for whom and for what we will vote.
Thank you. Mike, a second question for us?
Sure, we have a few more, but as far as one more, Andrew, you kind of alluded to this question in your answer, so thanks for stealing the thunder. But this was probably the one thing, and this is a question I've struggled with quite a bit over my years as a voting Catholic. So it seems very clear that there is no one candidate in this election who embodies all the tenets of the Catholic teaching. Why is there never any national party Catholic or candidate who runs on a platform such as this, which it seems would benefit the lives of everyone in this country? Now, this is one we never see. You just mentioned about how you can vote for someone who may not accept all our beliefs, Andrew. But this question is, how can we never have a candidate that actually is all of our beliefs? This is more of a psychological and theoretical question, but I'm curious from your, perspectives, why don't we have good Catholics running for election, or what we would consider, but some would consider good Catholics?
I was gonna say, I think I would argue that I think there are good Catholics that are running for office. One piece, and this gets back to that first question that Matt asked me about why we formed Civilize It. We are so polarized. We are so divided, and it seems to be, and maybe this is not as true on a city commission or a very local level, but when it comes to kind of larger state and national politics, candidates are so, it seems, forced to differentiate themselves from the other side of the aisle and to adhere rigorously to the party platform. And neither of these party platforms is the Catholic Church. And so it's hard to imagine, and this is sad in some ways, it's hard to imagine, but it's hard to imagine that any person could say, I am fully adhering to all of the Catholic Church's values on life and on creation and the poor and whatnot, because that person right now wouldn't fit into either political party. The Democrats would have their issues with it, and the Republicans would have their issue with it. The Green Party, I mean, it's just no party platform would I think tolerate that, and we're just so divided that it's just really hard for a person to do that. But I also want to add that I think that it is possible for a person to be faithful to the kind of fullness of the Catholic Church and say, here are the places that I feel strongly where I'm gonna advocate for, and also know that I'm a Catholic, and that's something that's really important to me. And I would hope that a person could do that and then go into whatever office it is and be able to adhere by their faith. And we see this all the time, that there are politicians on either side that cross the aisle, right? That say, I believe this is important, so I'm gonna vote with the other party for this because I think this is important. And so that gets back to that other issue in the Faithful Citizenship about looking at a person, and Jill mentioned this, a person's character, a person's decision making, their ability to work with other people. So it's I think it's possible that a person could do that. Not that it's easy, but Jesus never said this is going to be easy.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. That's gives us a lot to think about. And one thing that I would just like to add to that is that I think the way that our political parties, the system is set up, and that adherence to like the platforms, it tries to force us to see issues as oppositional, but they're not. Issues are actually really interconnected. What do I mean by that? Like, so we're kind of like made to think that we either have to be pro-life or care about the environment. And like, that's just absolutely not true. We have to live into the both and. People see issues as isolated sometimes, but, so like how does our respect life work help us to marvel at the wonder of God's creation? And how does our work to protect creation ensure that the innocent human life in the womb is not harmed, right? So like, that's like an example of how like those two things are like very connected, but the way that the conversation happens makes them seem oppositional, and they're not. Another example that I think of, the Catholic bishops in Open Wide Our Hearts, the pastoral letter against racism, they go into why racism is a life issue. And it's a beautiful reflection. I encourage people to go and check it out. But like another kind of just the interconnectedness of these issues. I have a friend who greatly inspires me. She's the director of a crisis pregnancy center for and home, a maternity home for women who had nowhere to go and otherwise were vulnerable to making the decision for abortion. And she gets it. Like she both advocates for protection of the unborn and to ensure that those women that she loves and cares about have access to the services that they need, the support from the government through the social safety net, for immigrants' rights, because a lot of the women who stay in her house are immigrants. So she goes the whole 9 yards and she gets it. And it's such an inspiring example. I think that we as a church and all people members of it need to do a better job of articulating why issues are not separate but are connected, and hopefully in that way sort of influence this oppositional viewpoint that gets kind of forced on us but really isn't accurate to how it works.
Great, thank you,
So,
Jill.
Matt, can I make a comment also on what I was saying at the beginning? And this reminds me of the question that Mike asked. It reminds me that was born in Bolivia in a different kind of environment, and politics are totally different. And one of the surprising things for me as I got ready to, be a citizen and start voting in the country, it was just to have two options. And that was something that it's really hard to deal with when you come from another country and you have elections and you have like 10 candidates, and you actually have to kind of discern for the person more than the party, kind of who will be the leader that will take your country to a better place in all the issues that you care for. So going into answer the question about, why we don't have, quote, good Catholics running for office, I think the job of our Catholics and parents, especially if we have parents in this panel, we have to form this little conscience early enough, as Jill mentioned. We have to be catechists in our own homes with our children, with our neighbors, and we have to teach them that they are not going to be, if they choose to run for an office or be the president of the classroom or the school or things like that, they have to consider a whole set of issues that we have to consider when we are electing a leader. What is the leader? The person that does make the decisions, but it does it for the good of everyone, not just for me. So in that case, our job as a parents is to also form those conscience. So hopefully when we vote for a person in the future, it's not going to be forming a person to go to one party instead of the other. But we have that communication between those two parties or those two candidates or the people that go across the aisle, because right now we're not doing that. Our leaders are not doing that. Everybody's just sticking to their side and they don't want to communicate. So I think we still have a lot of work to do, but it's in forming this new generation that we should pay attention on what we are teaching our children with our examples. I used to talk to students in 3rd or 4th grade, and they were already talking about candidates in their house, what the parents were saying. Who were they against? More than, what are they as a family, what are they for? So that goes back to learn about each other and not fear of not knowing others, because once you know somebody, when you make that relationship, that become your friend, that become the person that you will not do anything to harm them or to even talk back about them. You have to kind of keep it civilized. We have to have that conversation, mutual respect, they agree to disagree too. So we have a big job to do. And I think as a parents in a community, we have to form this conscience very early on and educate our children into what are the social teachings of our faith and the love of God above everything, so that's what we have to be about.
Thank you, Claudia. Mike, I think we got time for one more question. Can you share one more with us?
Sure, I can. This one I found interesting. You talked a lot about, faithful citizenship, and you've referred to some other things that people could, utilize as well. But one person asked this question very early on. Prior to the 2016 election, a priest in my parish did a sermon on the issues important to Catholics using the words from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I thought that was a much clearer discussion of the issues important to Catholics than documents produced by the USCCB. No offense, Jill. Any thoughts by the panel regarding the use of other documents, including the Catechism?
I think the Catechism's great. We should absolutely use it in our education and formation efforts.
Anyone else?
I would just weigh in also that one of the things I find, I teach an adult education class, and that's the preeminent document. And it's a very user-friendly document. You can pick a topic and just go to that topic and glean the key points right away. It's a great read, and it sort of leads you off in different directions. But so I would weigh that the person who asked the question, I support wholeheartedly. The Catechism of the Catholic Church is just a preeminent document for education, for catechesis, and also for forming our conscience.
Great.
I'd also point out that Faithful Citizenship does quote the Catechism. There's lots of references in Faithful Citizenship to papal teachings, to the Catechism, to Scripture. So I don't think it's an either or. They're, again, both great things. They obviously the Catechism isn't quoting Faithful Citizenship, but Faithful Citizenship is born out of other resources that we already have. So use it all.
Great, thank you. Just being mindful of the time, and with the first presidential debate at 9 p.m., I want to thank all of our panelists, Father Pete, Claudia, Jill, and Andrew, for helping us thoughtfully dig into and dialogue about Civilize It and Faithful Citizenship. What you've shared has really given us a lot of things to pray about and consider. I also want to thank Father Pete, TAC, and the Parish of St. Maximilian Kolbe for their collaboration and support to bring this panel to life. Special thanks to Mike Walsh and the Communications Department of the Diocese of Camden for their behind-the-scenes technical support. Lastly, I want to thank all of you that tuned in for your interest and your openness to learning and praying more about these important initiatives. Let me close in praying that we all may invite God deeply into our minds and hearts as we prayerfully discern how to form our consciences to vote. We also pray that we as Catholics can be a role model for our country of civil dialogue that prioritizes listening and understanding, that helps us stay unified as the body of Christ. We pray for all those who have office and seek office. They'll be open to the mind and heart of God and make policy that promotes solidarity, the care of the least of these, and the common good. Thanks for joining us. Be blessed and good night.